afternoon, everyone. This is Steve Sabaji. I am coming to you today from Austin, Texas, where it is quite beautiful out here today. Sorry, we're getting a little bit of a late start. We are just, again, sorting through a couple of technical issues, but we're here, we're ready to go, and we have a great program for you today. It's going to be covering the topic of subject to and a way of buying property within your self-directed IRA. So before we begin that, however, just want to take care of a couple of things first. We're going to start with a brief presentation. Let's see. We're using a slightly new technology here today. So Juan, help me out here. How do I get back to just the presentation? Or am I good to go the way I am?
You're good to go.
All right, great. Like I said, this is a little different. We're moving away from Zoom because everybody has such bad memories of Zoom, I think. So anyway, as I said, we're here for our self-directed IRA Saturday. And again, our subject today will be subject to purchasing of real estate. And before we get started, I'll just talk a little bit about who we are here at Quest Trust Company. We are the largest self-directed IRA custodian in the state of Texas, and we are one of the largest nationwide. We have over 20,000 investors across the United States and in excess of $2 billion in assets under management. We have well over 100 employees now. Many of them are certified IRA specialists. So we do get extra training and that extra level of expertise that we do bring to you as our clients, and are one of the most knowledgeable workforces out there in the industry. And currently, interestingly, our clients right now are sitting on somewhere in the range of $400 million in cash right now. That means our clients are looking for deals. So if you are also, looking to borrow, looking for funding for a project you may have, feel free to reach out. I'm going to go through a couple of networking opportunities that we do have, and it might be a way that you can introduce yourself to some of our clients. Now, just quick disclaimer, we here at Quest act purely as an administrator. The purpose of this presentation is purely that of education, and we do not offer anything in the way of tax, legal, or investment advice. So remember, anytime you're about to enter into a deal, make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure that you run it by potentially a financial advisor, certainly an attorney and or CPA. Now, in terms of some of the events we have coming up, for those of you who are here in Texas, all of our offices will be resuming our self-directed IRA socials. They are going to be on Tuesdays, and they are in Houston the first Tuesday of the month. Austin, it will be the second Tuesday of the month. And then the Dallas office will be the third Tuesday of the month. So these are, again, working within the COVID parameters. So we are trying to keep numbers fairly limited, but as that expands and relaxes, we'll be welcoming more and more people to our offices again. The events are also virtual. So if you are not able to attend because you don't live in the area, or you just, again, wish to perhaps stay a little distance, you certainly can do it in a virtual manner as well. Now, other things that we have that are going on, as I mentioned before, some of our classes and our webinars continue to go. So there are things like the live classes that we do multiple times a week. We have our virtual happy hour. This was the thing I was alluding to a few moments ago. This is a place where people come together from all over the country. They interact with each other. They put out there what it is they have or what they're looking for, and people have an opportunity to take it from there, one-to-one. It's every first and third Wednesday in the evening, and it's been very well received and very successful. And of course, you can always find archived content of webinars that we've had previously. You can find that on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And there is also information that's on our website as well in our extensive education page. All right, the big event of the year is coming back. QuestCon, it will be all virtual this year, but this year we're going to feature the topic of forecasting for 2022. It's been an interesting year. We'll wrap it up. We'll review exactly what we've seen, but the panel of experts we're going to have will talk specifically about what they see going forward. Again, many of you know it was quite an interesting year here, not the least of which had to do with the potential legislation. So I'm sure that will be a hot topic. But again, just the other trends and where we see things going forward through the economy. All right. Well, if you want to follow up with myself or one of my coworkers or anybody here at Quest, feel free to do so. We are always welcoming any kinds of inquiries that you may have. So if you need to get in touch with us, you can do it any way possible. You can scan the QR code, which you're seeing right there on your screen. That will get you to our communication, our channel, where you can set up an appointment. You can always just call us. You can drop into the chat box on our website. If you drop in on a Monday, I'll probably be on the chat box, so you can say hello, or you can just send us a straight up email and we'll get back to you. So that concludes my presentation. Scott and I were having a brief, interesting conversation before we began. Scott's going to try to keep up on football scores, but still present the information as in the excellent manner we expect. You want to drop some scores into the chat box? We'd appreciate it. Tell us how the weather is where you are. We were just joking that it's nice here, but we're not sure about other parts of the country. So we'd love to know. Share with us what you will. And of course, drop your questions in. Scott has actually asked me to jump in and ask questions along the way. So please feel free, and we'll keep this very interactive today and make sure everything is done in real time. All right, let's get Scott on now.
Hey, Steve.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm looking to now get out so that you can take over.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that we were having technical problems when, in fact, it was all about me, I think, and getting the PowerPoint uploaded for everybody. And I don't know if I can share half a screen here or not. In that regard, we'll find out here in a moment, at least. Either way it might be. But, and I appreciate you getting away from Zoom and the bad memories as well, just because it is extremely difficult to talk to a computer screen versus talking to an audience, which makes everything so much more fun. And I hope to give your audience a little bit of info about the owner finance world out there. And again, let's open it up to questions as we go through this. Everything is fair game regarding the owner finance world. Just a little bit of information about myself and what all we do. And so, Steve, of course, we are here in the Dallas area where it's a beautiful 59 degrees right now. It was about 35 this morning and a little nippy, but getting better. Don't know how it is anywhere else across the state. I'm sure down in Houston, it's a little bit more warm and maybe humid too. But I am, as I think the advertisements noted for Quest, I am a real estate and title attorney. Been doing that for way too long, some 30 plus years now. But I'm really a real estate investor. And by that, I've been in this industry now for something going on 30 years. Old commercial guy back from the 1980s. And yeah, I go back that far, unfortunately, in the apartment world quite a bit. And then morphed into the single family residential world back in the late 80s or early 1990s. Since then, I've been very fortunate to have bought and financed some 7,500 plus single family homes. And I bought a lot of those with creative financing. I bought a lot of those using bank and other private type financing. I will tell you that the great majority of those houses were all sold with some type of creative financing. Here in the Texas marketplace, our marketplace keeps changing. Many years ago, we were able to do things such as an executory contract or a contract for deed, which can be done in many other states. Here in Texas, we can buy a home with an executory contract as an investor. We just can't sell it to an owner occupant with one unless we jump through about 87 hoops. They have made it difficult for us in the Texas marketplace to do lease options unless you follow some very specific rules. And so as our rules have changed, we've morphed into more of the owner finance world out there. And anyway, so besides being an investor who's done a very large number of single family homes, I will tell the audience I am a rehabber. I love that part of the game. I love turning a piece of junk into gold whenever possible in the design aspects of it. I will tell you that we were Texas's largest hard money lender from 1997 through 2009, and we're back in that game again with a company called GOAT, that's GOAT funding, as well in the Texas marketplace. I am a home builder. We're currently building homes because it's cheaper to build houses than to buy houses. And we do property tax lending and all things in between. And I bring all that up just because it brings a knowledge base to our conversation. And I will tell the audience that this is all we do today is creative finance. Whether we're buying houses in that format, selling, whatever it might be, this is our primary forte. And so with that in mind, just to kind of jump into it, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the screen here and start talking about it, because subject to is an awesome acquisition strategy. And we'll go into all the various things here down the line. And as we go through it, as Steve said, if you got questions, shoot him a question. He's going to pop in and we'll get it answered and see where that goes. So feel free to open the door to anything regarding buying homes with creative financing, and there's many strategies to that, to selling houses with creative financing that is out there. So subject to, so let's just start off, guys. We need to know first and foremost, what is owner financing? And of course, simply put, it's where the seller is our financing source. Now, as we get into the owner finance world, we've got to understand that there's two types of owner financing. And I'm going to tell you all this. Owner financing equals seller financing. It's amazing. People always ask that question if there's a difference, and no, they are the same thing. Now, the two types are, first off, there is where there is no existing debt on the property. It's where you can buy a house from a seller direct, and they can finance the house for you. In fact, that loan, especially for IRA purposes, can be non-recourse. So it's easy to do. You can negotiate any terms you want to with them. You can negotiate principal only. You can make a down payment. You can give them an interest rate. You can provide them a fully amortizing loan for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, whatever you want to do. And then we come across those properties where there is existing debt and things get a little bit more difficult. And that's where we need a better understanding of what our options are when we do that. And so when we come across that property where a seller has existing debt, we have two ways that we can buy that property. One is using what we call a wraparound mortgage. That is where the seller makes a new loan to us, the buyer. That loan can be identical to the underlying debt terms and conditions, timeframes. It can be different, just so long as the monthly, the loan amount is not less and the pay down rate is at least at minimum the same. Now, the other option is where we buy a property subject to the existing debt. And that means we're leaving the existing loan in place and we are going to agree to make the monthly payments on behalf of that seller. So again, what does this mean? So I just kind of described it. And again, it's where we are agreeing to buy the property. We are agreeing to make the seller's payments on their mortgage. So whatever their monthly mortgage payment is, principal, interest, tax, and insurance, maybe they have mortgage insurance, we're agreeing to make that payment every month going forward. Now, one of my big issues, both as an investor and as an attorney, is I will always provide my seller with some type of a security instrument to ensure that I honor my agreement to pay their monthly payment. There are a lot of people in the marketplace right now who don't do that. They try to find ways to disguise the transaction. Well, they'll put a property into some type of a trust. Usually it's called a land trust. They take a deed only. And the problem with that is if something goes awry, the seller doesn't have a traditional mechanism, i.e. Foreclosure, to get the house back. And there are ways to draft transactions so that if the worst thing does happen, that seller needs to foreclose. Obviously, we could deed the house back to the seller if they're willing to accept it, or they could foreclose. And there are ways to structure that transaction where we have limited no liability should that occur. Now, from there, when we do a subject to transaction, what we want to do is understand that this is not an assumption transaction. That is apples and oranges. An assumption transaction means that we are going to go to the lender, provide that lender our financial information, and we are going to qualify for that loan as if we're getting a new loan. Many, many years ago, you could do a lot of assumptions. Today, not so much. And when we're taking a house subject to, this is a valid transaction between the seller and buyer, but we do not include the bank. Sometimes we call this a silent assumption because we're affecting the same thing as if we were assuming it. We're just simply not stepping into the shoes of the seller, who is the borrower in that instance, and relieving them from liability. Now, why do we want to go in and buy a house subject to? Well, from an IRA purpose, there's many reasons, because oftentimes we don't have to pay the entire amount of money out of pocket, and it's just simply a small amount of money we've got to pay in order to buy that home. But as we come in and we buy this house, and we agree to make the payments on underlying debt, keep in mind, many, many times we're picking up a very low interest rate. Typically, those rates are what a commercial bank would provide us as investors. We are picking up years of payments which have paid down the loan. And if you ever looked at an amortization schedule, it takes about 18 years on a standard 30-year amortization for the principal balance that you're paying each month to be more than what you're paying in interest. And so the more years you can that have been paid down the loan, obviously you're making larger principal payments now to the underlying debt, and you're paying lower interest rates as well. With a subject to transaction, the connotation and the difference between it and a wrap loan is this. If there is a wraparound loan, typically the buyer pays the seller and the seller pays the underlying mortgage company. With a subject to type transaction, the buyer is going to pay the mortgage company direct in most all instances. Now, we can incorporate a third-party loan servicer if we wish to do that too. There are things that there are issues with due on sale, and we're going to talk about due on sale in just a moment. And when we are entering into a transaction with a seller to buy their home this way, there are many things that we want to go through and disclose to our seller. And the two main ones are the due on sale clause and the fact that the seller has continuing liability until such time as that loan is paid off. And so often sellers believe that that loan is going to be paid off in 6 months or a year or 5 years, when in fact that is never our intent. Now, as we buy a house subject to the existing debt, we can go out and we can obtain title insurance if we wish to do so. Now, I will tell you that 99% of my transactions never get title insurance. Now, here in Texas, there's many reasons for that, primarily because there's only 3 kind of loans that can attach to a homestead property. And 98% or more of the houses that we buy are homesteads. And so when I know that only a purchase money mortgage, a mechanic's lien, or some type of a tax lien are the only kind of liens to attach, it leads me that there's very few things I need to search. And so normally we use an abstract of title instead of title insurance. In addition, there are many situations where title insurance is not even available. And that is if the underlying debt is a VA, an FHA, or a home equity loan, title insurance is typically not even available if you wanted it. And so normally we're going to be pulling an abstract. We're going to check title every time. Now, as the buyer, we make these decisions. And so as we move forward along the way, it's not up to the seller, but the seller doesn't need title insurance because their mortgage already has it and they know what their situation is. They're not making a new loan. And again, they know what their lien position is on their home. Now, insurance is a major item we have to understand as well. And it's important to navigate this correctly. And as the buyer of a home, we make all the decisions along the way. And not the seller. We could go out and get a new 1-year prepaid insurance policy. Maybe we can leave the existing policy in place where we get added on as a party of interest. And it's important to understand insurance as well. Now, as we get there, I made a comment earlier about who a buyer pays in a subject to type transaction and a wraparound. So in a subject to arrangement, we could pay the lender direct. I do not want to pay the seller direct. Again, usually we're buying a home. Our seller is usually in some type of distress. So I don't want to put money in their pocket that goes into a black hole and doesn't get paid to the mortgage company. We could use a third-party servicer and pay that servicer where the servicer turns around and pays the lender. But again, it's going to be the buyer's option of who they want to pay. And when we're paying the lender direct, our seller has a very easy mechanism to verify that we're making our payments as agreed. They can simply go online to the mortgage company and validate that we're making our payments through their online account or through a phone line. So it's easy for them to do. Made a little comment on the bottom down here, and it's important to get a grasp for what subject to means, because if we are in the investor world and we've taken other classes, we've heard this before. But the average person on the street has absolutely no idea what we're talking about. And so you've got to be reasonably well versed in how to explain to your seller exactly what you are doing. And I get this question a lot. No, would someone really allow me to take over their payments and do this? Remember, for the most part, a person's home is their largest asset that they will ever own. That's probably 85, 90% of the population, maybe more. We're also coming in and we are taking over their credit through their mortgage. These are two of the biggest and most important things most sellers have. And I'm just here to tell y'all, if y'all have not done a subject to transaction before, that absolutely this works. And we do it every day. And there's so many reasons out there why they do it. And it's all about market dynamics, guys. If you go back to the 1980s, there was a thing called FHA non-qualifying assumptions, where somebody had a loan, you could just simply walk in and assume it. There were no due on sale issues, not a problem. FHA knew that they had their original borrower on the hook, and if the borrower chose to sell one of us the property, that's their issue to ensure it gets paid and how that they're protected. What's interesting is about the subject to business is in the 1990s, you didn't see or hear a lot about subject to. The FHA non-qualifying assumables died out between 1986 and 1988, and eventually they all went away through the 90s. But in the 1990s, it was so easy to buy houses for cash. You didn't need to come in and buy houses subject to the existing debt, although it was being done in small amounts. Then our subprime era came in, where everybody simply wanted to blow through a house as fast as possible. They'd buy a house on the first of the month, get it fixed up, and within 30 or 60 days, it would be sold and cashed out. Very similar to the market here in Texas, at least we're in right now, where because of the interest rates, the influx of so many people into the Texas marketplace, there's a huge demand for housing that is causing multiple offers to go on. Then we hit the real estate crash of 08, 09, when people were just walking away from houses. They couldn't afford their payments. And the subject to business was reborn again in a very large way and has been running rampant for the last 10 or 12 years now out there. There was a huge need for the investor marketplace to step in to help sellers out of difficult situations that they had. They were going through foreclosures, and you're going to see a huge amount of issues out in the marketplace where our sellers are facing foreclosures. And again, think about it in today's marketplace, where there's still a large segment of the population who aren't employed. Maybe they're sitting at home collecting unemployment. Who knows? They don't have a job. When that unemployment goes out, how are they going to make their payments? Maybe they were able to do a forbearance on their back payments for the last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it might be. But now they've got to make their payments going forward, and they still don't have a job. What are they going to do? Because they're going to be facing foreclosure. And I think we can all agree there is going to be something happening forthcoming in our marketplace, whether that's in the next 6 months, year, sometime, but this is going to happen. Here in the Texas marketplace alone, 8.8% of the mortgages are in default today. That is not forbearance status. That's separate from that. They're in default. That is a very large percentage. And I'll bring that up in a moment. Anyway, people who have not maintained their home well, who maybe have gotten in trouble with their payments, aren't able to sell their house through a retail status because it won't pass appraisal. Maybe they have lien issues that they can't navigate. They have judgment liens, IRS liens, child support liens, and things of this nature that make it untenable to sell the house through traditional mechanisms. Maybe they just bought the house recently. They haven't gained enough equity. They need to sell for some reason, but unable to because of their equity position. And the realtor world cannot help them out there. They don't want to become a landlord. I had one client that I bought a house subject to from several years ago who was moving to Australia. Do you think that they really wanted to be an absentee landlord from Australia? Absolutely not. They don't want to do it. Short sales, they used to be very popular back in the 2010, 11, 12, 13 era, and they seem to be really going away. They're still available, but not as prevalent as they used to be. And so often when we present a subject to transaction to a seller, we walk them through some of their options that are out there. They realize they're stuck and they don't have any other options but to consider buying or selling their home subject to the existing debt. And I will promise you, when you learn to present this to a seller properly, they will do this almost every time. Now, why would a seller, again, sell us their house subject to the debt, let us step in, take over their mortgage, take over their credit? And there are so many reasons that we see out there. Again, job loss allows them not to make their payments. Maybe they were working on a short sale and all of a sudden they got turned down, but instead of putting their payments away to bring that loan current, they spent all the money. And so now, instead of being just 3 or 4 months behind in payments, they're 10 months behind in payments, and there's no way to catch up. So there's many people who are facing foreclosure. There are many people who are facing divorce, or they're splitting up in some format. They have obviously job loss issues. They have transfer issues, medical issues, and I'm sure we could sit here and come up with 8 or 10 other things that are happening that create situations where they want to get out of the property, but for some reason they can't sell it in a retail fashion. And I don't want us to look at today's economy as if it's going to be here forever, because it is not. We're in this horribly unique scenario where high demand, at least in the Texas marketplace. Maybe there's low demand in other states where people are moving out and they don't have the ability to sell the house. The low interest rates at some point in time have to go away. You can't maintain in our economy rates as low as they are right now. And I've heard that they're going to be going up in the first quarter already. But all these reasons funnel us into why we can talk to a seller with seller financing and why they'll sell us the property. I want to just take a moment and mention that in this little short 45 minute presentation or so, I cannot teach you all of the ins and outs of subject to and owner financing. It is impossible. We do have a website that is called the ownerfinancenetwork.com, which is our training site for seller financing, where we do take our investors all the way through owner financing, all the various issues. And I would just invite you just to check that out at your convenience. We'll talk more about that later. So as we get into buying houses through creative finance, we have to find a mechanism where we can talk to realtors and talk to sellers appropriately. Because in the marketplace, especially when you're talking to realtors and to real estate brokers and even homeowners, what comes up is this legal? Can you really do this? And of course, the simple answer is yeah. And so what I found as I have presented this out to the marketplace, to both homeowners and to realtors, there are just things that we need to understand. Now, some of this is going to be based here in the Texas marketplace, but I'm going to assume it's going to be factually accurate in every state around the country. So we hear out there that owner financing is illegal. And guys, it is not illegal. We will hear that there are contractual issues that come up because of due on sale and Texas property code requirements and other things of this nature. Now, in Texas, and I'm just going to use Texas as an example, if someone tells you that the property is, or the transaction is illegal, I steer them first off to the Texas Real Estate Commission, or TREC, contract form. Because in that contract, it talks about seller financing, and we have a seller financing addendum. In addition, here in Texas at least, in our Texas Property Code, the section is Chapter 5, and it's Section 5.016, that tells us that if we're going to buy a property, leaving an existing lien in place, there is a particular form that it's a promulgated form that we must fill out, and a seller must provide a buyer. It's not may, it is must provide a buyer that disclosure at least 7 days prior to closing, or else the buyer can terminate the transaction for any reason they wish to do so. You can look up and say, the sky is blue, I want to terminate my transaction. Done. So that is an easy way to look at that a little bit. Understanding due on sale and what it means and how to present that to a seller and a realtor is also important. And due on sale was obviously created many years ago for the obvious reason that if you sold your house and you had a mortgage, you were supposed to pay off that mortgage at closing. Got it. Pretty easy. Well, however, when we do a seller finance transaction, and especially a subject to transaction, that existing loan is staying in place. And that is a violation of the due on sale clause. Now, over the years, mortgage companies have taken the simple definition of due on sale, and they have said such things that if you sell a house with seller financing, even though their borrower is still liable on the loan and nothing's changed, and they're still in first lien position, they can call the loan due. It doesn't make sense, but they have the right to do it. If you sell the house using an executory contract, which is a contract for deed, they can call the loan due. In some jurisdictions, if you lease the house in excess of 3 years, they can call the loan due. If you put the property into a trust and convey the beneficial interest, they can call the loan due. The bottom line is it's all about control by the mortgage companies out there. Now, the bottom line with this too is that due on sale is not illegal. It is simply the breach of a contractual obligation. And there's a gentleman up in Colorado who coined the phrase, there is no due on sale jail that's out there. And ask yourself this question, and this is when I'm talking to a seller and even buyers, I always bring this up. I ask simple questions. What is it that a mortgage company really wants? Well, the bottom line is they want their payments. Do they want to own your house? Heck no, they don't. They're not in that business. A mortgage company, when they foreclose on a property, the average loss is between $50,000 and $60,000. They're in the business of making loans. They're not in the real estate business. I've been asked the question, well, what if interest rates escalate? Wouldn't a bank want to get their house back so they could redeploy that money at higher interest rates? The simple answer is maybe, but I will tell you, you go back to the late 1980s and 90s where interest rates went up as high as 21%. You didn't see a lot of this going on at all. Now, there are other myths that we have to understand, and one that you'll hear is, well, you have to be licensed to sell your house with owner financing. Now, not in Texas, you don't. An owner who is selling their home doesn't have to be licensed to do it in this format. We as investors, if we're selling our house in some format, we may have to be licensed. There's a new law in Texas coming down effective January the 1st of 2022 that says if you do 3 or more wraparound transactions in a 12-month period, we have to have a license in that instance. For those of you who have an interest in looking at that, go to the ownerfinancenetwork.com website, where we did about a 45-minute presentation on this new law to help the marketplace understand what this new WRAP bill is talking about. There may be SAFE Act issues, and the SAFE Act came into play in about 2009 or 2010. And basically what it says is that you should incorporate into every seller finance transaction a residential mortgage loan originator. That's a fancy name for a mortgage broker today. So we call that an RMLO. Now, when we are buying a house from a seller with any type of seller financing, We do not have to use an armallo or process ourselves with our seller. But a seller could ask you to provide them financial information, and that is absolutely fine to give it to them if they ask. I will tell you that I may have had in the last 20 years, 2 sellers ask a borrower for financial information. Don't know why, they just don't do it. And I would recommend for anyone listening who is not in Texas, take a moment and check with a knowledgeable, and I use that word, knowledgeable real estate attorney in your state who actually understands this business. Even here in Texas, which is one of the largest creative finance states in the union, there are so few attorneys that actually understand this business. The marketplace thinks that because you go to a title company and maybe there's a title company attorney there, that attorney understands this business. And I am here to tell you, they do not. This is not in their bailiwick. They just don't do these kind of things. This is a very specific type transaction. Here in Texas, we're here to help out the marketplace to understand this business, help them navigate this, whether you're buying a house into your IRA utilizing a subject to transaction or any type of creative financing per se. We work with investors, not just in the Texas marketplace, but we act as a closing agent across the country as well. We just can't prepare legal documents in other states, so we reach out to local real estate attorneys and document preparation firms to do that for us. Now, when we get involved with owner financing, we have to figure out, are we doing a commercial transaction or a consumer transaction? This is huge, and we have to understand it. Now, a transaction is a commercial transaction if it is for business purposes, meaning non-owner occupied. So if you're going to buy a house as a rental property, that is a commercial transaction. However, if you're going to live in that house as your personal residence, or if you're going to sell the house to someone who's going to live in the home as their residence, that becomes a consumer transaction, and those transactions are highly regulated, and we have to understand those regulations, which are everything from the state's property code. Here in Texas, we have a few issues we have to deal with, what the SAFE Act says, what Dodd-Frank says, as well as what RESPA, or the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, says. So understanding this, we go through those items. This next slide I just covered. So when we're looking at buying a home from a seller using creative finance, I always recommend, before we buy that house, understand what your back-end option is and have that option ready to go. Don't wait to buy the house and then decide. You may lose a lot of money and things may happen, and you need to be able to make decisions very quickly. So when we buy houses into our IRA using a creative finance type transaction, maybe our intent is to fix that house up, rehab it, and sell it retail. Not a problem. When we, and if we're going to do that, I usually let it status like that and move forward. Maybe we're going to lease the property. And if we lease the property, it is possible we may want to consider putting that property into some type of a land trust in which the IRA becomes the beneficiary. And why do we do that? Well, it helps to disguise the transaction from the lender a bit. And I wish I had time to get into that more, but I don't in this presentation. Are we going to do a back-end owner finance transaction selling the home to a homeowner? We call that a wraparound. So regardless how we bought the property, if we bought it subject to the existing debt, if we bought it with any type of financing in place, we sell it to a homeowner, it's going to be called a wraparound to that buyer. We want to understand what it is we're doing out there as we get into our transaction. So when we buy a home, leaving the existing debt in place, you know, again, what are we buying? And again, obviously we're buying the property. We're buying long-term financing that was put on an original 30-year mortgage in most cases. In the investor world, if we go to a small commercial bank, most of our commercial banks are going to provide us a 5-year term loan amortized over 15 years, as opposed to a fixed rate 30-year loan. We are oftentimes getting much lower interest rates. We're getting many, many years paid off the mortgage, and we're buying cash flow. We're buying short-term income, which might be able to capitalize on a down payment from a back-end home buyer. We're buying potential future long-term income from positive cash flow. We're buying not only current equity, but we're buying future equity, because if we play this creative finance game, our back-end home buyer's loan is getting paid down much, much slower than the loan that we took over. And so we have all these great things that give us an advantage when buying a home subject to the existing debt. Now, when we do this, we want to keep in mind that we are controlling that debt of our seller. And what it does for us is it creates what I call moral liability, but it does not create legal liability, because we did not go to that mortgage company and we did not sign the note when we took over that loan. We simply gave the seller our commitment to make their payments on their behalf. Now, owner financing is a very different way of thinking. I will tell you from my perspective, back in the 1990s, for 6-8 years plus, we were buying 20 houses a month. And these were not wholesale transactions, these were rehabs. And so often we were buying equity. We would want to go buy a house at 50 cents on the dollar or 60 cents on the dollar or 70. Now today, it is about buying equity, and that is out there, especially based upon the jurisdiction you're in, but it's about cash flow, and cash flow is what drives a business. And I have many examples to walk through on what I mean by this. But I'm going to just throw one out there for the audience, and that is, if I could see a show of hands, which I can't see, unfortunately, I always ask the audience, if you're talking to a seller and that seller owes $100,000 on their home. Let's say that they have a 4% interest rate and they've been in that loan for 5 years. So they have 25 years left on the mortgage. The only problem is, for whatever reason it might be, the house is worth $100,000. Maybe the marketplace turned a little bit. So instead of being on the upswing where it is now, it's on the downswing. And for anybody who's been in the investment business long enough, we all know that that can happen, and it does happen routinely. And so our seller, for lack of a better word, is almost upside down. I always ask, who would want to buy that property? Almost no one wants to buy it because there's no equity. I will jump on that deal every day, because when you learn how to play the creative finance game, where you're going to sell that home to a back-end home buyer, not for $100,000, but for $110,000, where you get a $10,000 down payment, and you're going to carry back a much higher interest rate. Let's just say in this case, on a $100,000 loan, a 10% interest rate. So that the buyer's monthly payment is close to the current rental marketplace where that house is located. What do we as the investor gain by doing that? We have zero equity. Well, what we gain is our buyer is giving us a $100,000 loan that has a 30-year on it, and we took over a $100,000 loan that has 25 years. So somewhere down the road, we're paying more principal to our loan than the buyer is. In addition, I am making a 5% interest rate spread between what my buyer is paying me and my seller is paying me. So I am making $5,000 a year positive cash flow. If that's a $200,000 house, I'm making $10,000 a year. And I'm doing that with limited liability along the way. And then with that down payment, maybe I paid a marketing rep to help me sell it. Maybe I had some repairs, maybe I had some interest carried, but oftentimes I'm going to be able to put $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 or more in my pocket from that down payment as well. Now, in the marketplace today, here in Texas, you see a shift in the subject to transactions, and I can't speak to other states at this time, but you go back to the real estate crash in 08, 09, we were able to buy houses and literally walk into a house that was in excellent condition. Maybe it needed cleaning, maybe it needed the carpet cleaned, but very limited repairs. The sellers needed out for every reason that we can imagine back then. And we were able to sell that property, not only get a down payment that we could put in our pocket immediately, we could gain immediate equity, and especially future equity, and immediate cash flow. Today, at least here in the Texas marketplace, what I see is most of the time we're buying a home subject to the debt. Our seller is behind in payments, so we need cash to bring that loan current. Well, that cash can come from our IRA, obviously. The house also usually needs some repairs, some more than others. Okay, again, our IRA can fund those repairs. And oftentimes our sellers need a little bit of money to move. Maybe our sellers want some equity, because you do run across transactions where a seller may have, they owe $60,000, the house is worth $100,000, and they want maybe $20,000 in equity be paid. Great. Well, we can fund that with cash, or maybe with a note where we agree to pay that seller certain terms and conditions under that note from the IRA to the seller. So even in a situation that has zero equity, this transaction makes huge sense. It is simply getting over the hurdle of recognizing you don't have to have equity. Sometimes it is all about the cash flow. Now, I want to give you another example of a transaction that I did not too long ago. And again, this is one of those where when you look at it, everybody in the room, nobody would buy this. And this is understanding how to play the game. And so in this instance, this is a property in the Dallas, Texas area. The value was $210,000. That was the after repaired value of the property. The seller had called based on some of our advertising. And based upon that, we were able to do some online checking. We knew she had a first lien mortgage. We could estimate about what she owed. We didn't know all the details yet. We also found that there was a second lien mortgage on the property. In this case, it was a HUD second lien. By that, I mean this seller had already been through a loan modification where she had been 3 years behind in payments. And they modified her loan and put the arrearages in a zero interest, zero payment loan for 27 years. So we went on the house call. We knew what the house was worth. We knew about what she owed on the first and second lien, but that was all we knowed. So of course, when we got there, we determined the house needed $25,000 of repairs to get to market value. We were able to look at a mortgage statement, and in this instance, she owed about $123,000, and the interest rate was 3.25%. She didn't even realize she had the $36,000 second lien because it was one of those out of sight, out of mind situations. But besides all of that, she was another $15,000 behind in payments, which added up. She's 4 years behind in payments. And this was a good house in a good location, good neighborhood, needed work to get there. And it was an active foreclosure. We had 3 weeks. When you add up all those numbers, it comes up to about $195,000 plus or minus. Obviously, you've got to pay some interest carry out of pocket while you're going through the repairs in the property. And it may put you somewhere around $200,000 all in the house. Well, a house worth $210,000 retail, so that if you sent an appraiser out there, that's what they would appraise it for. A retail buyer, if you listed that house for sale, by the time you paid commissions and by the time you paid your closing costs and other fees, you would probably lose money. You could not offer this lady all cash because the usual cash offer on a house like this would be probably between $140,000 and $150,000 because we're basing our cash offer based on the after repaired value. So this was a house that we bought. I had to come up with about $43,000 in cash to buy it. That cash was used to pay the rehab. It was paid to bring the loan current and for some interest carry. And I paid the seller $1,000 to help her get a moving truck to move. We cleaned the house up very nicely. And in 3 weeks, we sold this house for $239,900 and got a $24,000 down payment. So I took that $24,000 and I applied it to my $43,000. I was actually about $45,000 out of pocket. And so I applied that to my $45,000. And in this instance, I was generating $1,000 a month positive cash flow. So we had borrowed private capital for this $45,000 we had borrowed, and it took me about 2 years to pay them back $1,000 a month. But after that time frame, I now owned a property that had $65,000 of hard equity. That's the difference between what I owed. That's the 123 loan and the 36 loan. And what my borrower owed me, meaning if they refinanced or sold the house, I'm able to put $65,000 back into my company, or if you had bought it in your IRA, or I'm able to put $1,000 a month positive cash flow in there for the next 26 years when the loan will get paid off, and then that would actually increase a little bit more. And all you've got to do is do the math on that cash flow and see how awesome that is. But it's when you learn how to play this game of owner financing, how to buy a home subject to, how to navigate your loans properly, how to look at a transaction through a different lens, you're able to come up with transactions like this that become absolutely awesome. Now, this didn't generate income today. It generates income tomorrow. And a lot of us do that within our IRAs. If you're the real estate investor in the who needs to live on this money, maybe you can't do this. But all of these things are options for the investor along the way. What I'll tell you is that seller financing is an awesome way to buy houses, whether you buy it from the seller direct, whether you buy it subject to the existing debt, whether you buy the property with a wraparound mortgage. All of these work. Learning how to use creative financing on the back end is awesome. People ask me, why don't I lease properties versus owner financing? And I will tell you, I have owned hundreds of rental properties at one time. And I hate being a landlord. It's just me. Therefore, I sell all my homes using seller financing, where I am able to sell my house at 110% of market value. I get 110% of the rental amount, and I am not liable for any repairs. And it allows me to do more transactions with less issues and less headaches along the way. Now, here at our companies, we are trying to be a true service provider to the creative finance industry. Our company called the Owner Finance Network is a vertically integrated company that incorporates legal services through our law firm, Horne and Associates. I said previously that we do all transactions throughout Texas, and in other states we act as escrow agents. We are a title company. If we're obtaining title insurance when we buy or sell, we have the ability to do that for you here in the Texas marketplace, and also in other states as well, where we have licensing options. We have what's called a note pro service. So if you need help in structuring your transaction, we provide that service. We are loan servicing, meaning we are the RMLO, the residential mortgage loan originator, to help process your buyer if you're electing to do a back-end owner finance transaction. And we do that in all 50 states. And we are OFN loan servicing, where we are a mortgage servicer for the owner finance community. And we're very different than your average servicer out there because we are much more proactive in the collection process than I think anybody else. In addition, we are hard money lenders, we're real estate investors, and truly we're all things in between in this industry. And this is absolutely an awesome industry for us to be in. It's just a lot of fun to go out and to play and to work. And so with that, if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer those. So I'll let Steve bring that up if anybody does. But I hope that helped everybody out in the industry about how creative financing works, how you can buy properties within your scope of your IRA and be completely compliant. And one of the things that's so great is how you can simply multiply your IRA by doing this and gain a lot of wealth. As we're doing our seminars and whatnot on self-financing around the state, we truly show how this is a true wealth building process. So guys, I hope that helps you out, and I am open for questions. And I don't know if Steve or anybody else fell asleep yet or not, but we'll see. I'm just looking at football scores right now, guys. Well, I'm assuming that everybody has gotten off for a moment. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to email them to us. Our email here is info@Horne, Horne, realestatelaw.com. Check all of our various companies out online, and we'll look forward to helping you out in your forthcoming transactions. Thanks so much, guys.